Hi guys, this is Karthik from Caapid Simplified. If you hear a nice voice, it's probably because of this rose gold mic I borrowed. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about one question that five people have almost asked me in the last couple of days. It's all about loans. How do we finance our DDS education? How do we pay back our DDS education? How long is it going to take for us to pay back? Is this even a financially worthy proposition? Because engineering schools do not charge so much, but dental schools charge a lot. Are we really doing the right thing? How do we choose between going for a residency versus a DDS from a financial point of view? So on and so forth. Since you've been hearing all these questions, I thought I can answer them in the best way possible so that you can come back to me only with a small number of questions and get most of the answers you need from this video. First, is DDS expensive? Definitely. You're going to pay a hell of a lot of money. That's almost as less as $160,000 to as high as $400,000, depending on which school you go to. There are just 28 schools that offer this program, about 763 seats, rough estimate. And each of these schools on average charge about $220,000 in tuition fee. That's the average fee. And please note, the $220,000 that they charge is only for tuition expenses. You will have to borrow additionally for living, for your dependents, so on and so forth. So keep in mind, if I'm going to go to NYU and if the fees is pretty low, you're not just paying for the school's tuition fee, you're also going to pay for the living expenses there. And if you know the prices in New York, if you want to stay at a single bedroom apartment in Manhattan, you're going to pay upwards of $1,500 just for a single room. If you're going to stay somewhere like Alton, which is where SIU is located, you're going to pay as low as $300 for a single room. If you move in with your family, you'll accordingly extrapolate that number. So it'll be a good choice to have a discussion with your family, with your spouse, or whoever it is, about where you want to move, whether you want to move into a shared accommodation, an independent accommodation, a suburban accommodation, or something close to the school. All of these will really influence how much you're going to additionally spend in living expenses. I know dentists who join the IDP program and spend anywhere between $24,000 and $50,000 within the 2 years that they are near school, exclusively for living. Definitely, you can even spend way lesser, but that's up to you. So $220,000 is the tuition fee. Like I said, on top of that or below that, you have additionally your living expenses, and that's going to vary depending on the school. Texas is the cheapest. The coasts are obviously expensive, California, New York, and so on. So make a wise choice on which schools you go for. I think really good schools would be something like University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. The school is very credible, but Ann Arbor is a backward city, so it's going to be extremely cheap for you to just live and study there. How do you finance loans? The best way to finance a loan is by using your own money. Now, obviously, for a lot of us, it doesn't make sense to use our own money because we may not have that much amount of money, or we may have that invested in other places. If you were to borrow $1, right, from an education loan company, they're going to charge you anywhere between as low as 4% to as high as 16% interest on that $1. If you take that $1 and put it in the stock market, the average growth rate in the US is about 6%, and in India is upwards of 8%. So it's going to grow a lot more than when you borrow. So the interest you're paying could be lesser than the growth you get when you invest in the stock market. You can do the math with other forms of investment and how much is the actual multiple. Definitely, if you take the $1 and put it in real estate, depending on the location, it could even multiply further. In some certain high rocket stocks or even cryptocurrency, it's going to multiply even further. But my point is, it's better to have your own savings or your borrowed money invested in other forms of finances rather than use it for your own education. I always strongly recommend, and it does make financial sense, to take an education loan to sponsor your education, because education loan money is cheap. It's called cheap credit. It comes at the lowest interest rates that one can afford amongst all the options they have available to them. So what are these options and how expensive are they? Now, for someone who has no guarantor, for someone who has absolutely no collateral to pledge, the best loan that they would get is from Prodigy or Discover. Both of these loan companies will give you money, will lend you money without you pledging collateral and without you having a guarantor per se. That's really good. However, there's one catch, there's one caveat, and that one catch is that they do not lend money to everybody. You will be selected or approved for being eligible for a loan based on which city you live in, which state you live in, and which school you go to. These are the criteria that they use to eliminate people. I've also heard Prodigy eliminates people based on country of origin. Certain Middle Eastern countries do not get approved very easily. So there is some kind of inherent selection bias that they have when they approve loans for people without collateral, without a cosigner. Now, what if you have a cosigner? What if you have somebody who can guarantee that you will pay the bank back properly? A cosigner does not need to have collateral, meaning they don't need to have to pledge property, land, gold, or something else in order to borrow money for you. All they have to do is to have some kind of financial asset and a good credit standing. A credit standing of something above 680 is pretty good enough to get a loan approved. They should definitely have a green card or US citizenship. And if they don't have any other financial asset, they should at least have a regular salary coming in. If your cosigner is someone who has a green card holder or is a citizen, is drawing upwards of $120,000 a year in salary, then the combination of these is going to get them approved for in becoming an eligible cosigner for you. So if you have a cosigner like this who can sign for you, they don't have to be a blood relation, then you can go ahead and apply from many banks, right? And when I talk about many banks, I'm talking about everything from your Sallie Mae's to your Fannie Mae's to your Citizens Bank to even Discover, Prodigy, and so on and so forth. Wherever they apply private lending groups, they're going to get a very competitive, very compelling interest rate, from as low as 4% variable to as high as 8%, but not more than that. So that's really a very good option to go with if you want to borrow, if you have a cosigner. Now, what if you are a US citizen or a green card holder yourself? That option is even more compelling. In that case, you can apply to a FAFSA loan, a government-aided student loan. The advantage with applying to FAFSA is it's FAFSA, that's why it's FAFSA. The advantage is that if the government is charging a high interest rate and you're unable to pay, they're not going to come after you and really chase you down like a proper collection agency would do. Very often you've seen, even recently, the government excuses education loans off, gives discounts on education loans. Earlier this year, for everybody who had education loan in the US, they got a $10,000 discount on their total principal. More recently, they've dropped interest rates. There's even a lot of trillions of dollars pumped into removing people out of education loan bankruptcy, meaning they're completely forgiving the loans in totality. For someone like you who's going to borrow a lot of money and who has a guaranteed job as a dentist, they're probably not going to forgive the entire loan, which is $200,000. But to the best extent possible, you will bank on these benefits that the government provides from time to time in terms of different stimuluses. That is if you're a green card holder or a citizen. Small catch, the interest rate offered by FAFSA, the government, could be higher than private lending groups, right? So it could be at a higher interest rate, but it has the benefits of getting forgiveness or discounts when the situation is really bad all across the country. You got to weigh your pros and cons when making the decision between the two. So I've spoken about three things. One is the option of you being in the US and you being eligible to apply based on which school you go to, which state you're applying from, blah blah blah, and you do not have a cosigner or you don't have property. In that case, you're going to go with Prodigy or Discover. The next group is if you have a cosigner, someone who is a green card holder or citizen, someone who makes more than $120,000, or if not, if he doesn't have a salary or she doesn't have a salary, at least has some kind of assets to prove and a good credit standing of about 680. In that case, you can go with the second option, which is private lending groups. Third is if you are a citizen or a green card holder in the US, you can apply to FAFSA or government lending groups. Now, what if none of this applies, right? You are probably in a different country. You're probably in Pakistan, you're probably in Nepal, you're probably in the Middle East. You aren't eligible to Prodigy loans or Discover loans. You do not have a good credit score. You don't have an SSN number in the US. You don't have a cosigner. Um, you don't have a green card or citizenship yourself. In that case, what do? There's just one option. This is to borrow from an education loan provider in your home country. This is not the most advantageous. It has a lot of disadvantages, especially in terms of taxes. Later, when you start earning, you cannot subsidize your taxes for the education loan. It's called education loan credit, and you cannot do that if you're borrowing in a foreign country outside the US. Also, another disadvantage that you have is if you borrow from a foreign country outside the US, you cannot apply for a refinancing loan. I saw Divakar had recently posted a video on refinancing. Refinancing is basically taking your existing loan, which is at a higher interest rate, and paying that off with a cheaper loan at a lower interest rate. That's called refinancing loans. So if your current education loan is at 6.75% from Prodigy, you can pay that off with a refinancing loan at anywhere between 2 and 4%. So now you still are going to pay back the loan, but at a lower interest rate, meaning lesser amount of money goes per installment. So you will not be eligible for a refinancing education loan if you borrow money from a foreign country. And that's why there's a second disadvantage. The third disadvantage is you have to pledge collateral. Most banks, even government banks in foreign countries, expect you to pledge collateral, and the value of the collateral needs to be almost 1.2 or 1.6 times the actual value of the loan. So if you're going to borrow $1, you have to pledge a property that's worth $1.6 in the bank. And for the entire period that you're continuing to pay back your education loan, the property will be locked in, meaning you're not going to be able to sell it, or you're not going to be able to pledge it somewhere else during the period that you're actually paying it back. So that's the catch with borrowing from your home country. Now moving even further, how long will it take for you to pay back your loans? It's going to take anywhere between 5, 10, or 15 years. Right? The least amount of time it will take to pay back your loans, if you do not have any expenses and you're probably being sponsored by your family, is 2.5 years. An average salary, not actually the base salary that most dentists get in the US is $120,000. Of course, based on where you're getting employed, a DSO, a rural area, so on and so forth, your salary is going to increase way higher, all the way up to $220,000. So between $120,000 base and $220,000, you're going to be able to pay 30% or 40% taxes to the government and still have enough savings in your bank to be able to pay off the loan very quickly, very rapidly in 2.5 years. If you want to pay it slowly over installments, it's good to spread out your loans. And I would recommend choosing the 10-year or 15-year tenure to pay back your loans. Now you might ask, why do I want to hold on to a loan for so long? Why can't I pay it all off instantly and have a sigh of relief? It's always good to leverage money. And when you talk about leveraging money, that means have more cash in hand and dispense less out. So for an education loan that is actually cheap credit, meaning it comes at low interest rate, it's better to leverage it yourself. Use it for other financial goals or financial priorities, and pay off your education loan pretty slowly. Let me give you a simple example to understand this. Assuming I'm going to go to my friend, and my friend has an apple tree, right? I borrow the apples from him. Actually, I shouldn't have used a perishable example. Some other example. A chair. I borrow the chair from my friend for 2 rupees a day. And then now I go to my other friend and tell him, hey, you can rent it from me at 8 rupees a day. Then after 4 or 5 days, I take the chair back and give it to my first friend. Now, can you see, even though I borrowed it at a lesser cost, I am renting it out at a higher cost and making more money. That's the way education loans can work. The money that you have borrowed is at a very low interest rate, between 2 and 8%. And the money that I invest somewhere, either in a property or in the stock market or in your child's education, is at a higher growth rate, meaning it can grow between 8 and 16% or even higher. So I get cheap money and I lend it out for a higher growth. So whatever is the difference is my savings. Therefore, whenever you get cheap credit, it makes sense to leverage your finances. So always, it's a good strategy to spread out your education loan and pay it over time. You will not be paying more because your money is multiplying more when it's in your pocket. Now, it'll be dumb if you are going to buy a fixed asset that does not appreciate and keep that on the side. I mean, gold is not the right example. It appreciates pretty fast, but there are other fixed assets like a car. If you're going to take an education loan and use that money to buy a car, that's a depreciating asset. So it's not going to pay you back. Okay, long-winded story. We have got the point. 5, 10, or 15 years to pay back your loan, 2.5 years at an express rate if you pay back really, really fast. And that's the way you can do it. I've also spoken to you a little bit about which country to borrow from, what are your different options. Let me stop here. It's about 15 minutes. If you have any questions related to finances, where to borrow money, who to borrow from, how do you convince a cosigner, what are the banking restrictions that I might be facing, how do I apply for a refinancing loan, what is the average salary I can get when I go for a job, how do I look for a high-paying job while I'm in school, how do I improve my chances of improving my salary bracket, how do I save on taxes, any such questions, please feel free to contact me. Contact Caapid Simplified and we'll help you out. Especially if you are thinking about starting your own practice after you complete DDS, we might be a really good resource. Right now, in my day job, I help around 20 dental practices all across the US actually improve their business. I'm helping them grow their revenue from $100 today to $120 year on year. So I can definitely help you get started from scratch and we can grow from there. Thank you so much. This is Karthik from Caapid Simplified once again.